Typically, that's an induction process.
Okay.
That requires a direct contact or within a short frame, a short distance, so that you're catching the flux that's being created.
But this is, you're talking about something completely different, just zapping it out of the air.
Hmm.
God, like a vacuum cleaner. It's just shocking. So, ideally, and I guess the concern here is that if you think of it from a historical ancestral perspective, where we seek to emulate the conditions that our ancient ancestors evolved in, because with the understanding that that's what our normal physiology is really expecting, because our genes don't change that rapidly. So when we're exposed to different conditions that our ancestors weren't, more likely it's not good. It's going to be harmful than helpful. So obviously our ancestors were never exposed to electricity and these types of currents and magnetic and electrical fields, and there's going to be potential problems, and we can see those in large numbers of people, specifically those who are not healthy to begin with, and are prone to these electrical sensitivities. And you see a fair number of those, don't you?
Right. Especially with children or young children who don't have their immune systems developed yet, in utero or newborn.
So you see a much higher percentage in kids than you do in adults.
I don't know that it's a higher percentage. I just guess my heart is more into it when it's kids.
Yeah. Well, they're certainly most susceptible to long-term damage, just because, as well, I'm thinking of cell phones, because their skull is so much thinner, their skull bones, so that the radiation is easier able to penetrate and hit their brain, which is immature and not well developed, and more susceptible from that perspective too. So you've got a double whammy.
Right. And the chronic exposure. I cringe when I see children, under the age of 20 after the skull's developed, but kids under the age of 20 that are, constantly on cell phones, or a cell phone held up to their head, or text messaging or whatever. It's a 24/7, addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's yeah, you could certainly call it addiction, but it's certainly a common part of the culture at this point. It's really their appendage. It's the way that most kids are communicating now. So it's a pervasive reality that we've adopted as a culture, and there's a consequence for that. So I think it's really a warning call, and sometimes it's hard to I guess appreciate or adopt all these messages, but really this is an important one, and it doesn't take a heck of a lot to take some precautions. Are there other recommendations you would advise?
There there is a meter, and I know people always cringe when you start talking about meters, or anybody talks about meters. But magnetic fields in homes, there's no way to know whether or not you have a magnetic field problem. You do know it, as we talked about, if there are refrigerators in the wall, or if there's a television on the other side of your wall, or something like that, or your power meter is there. We know that's a problem. Get away from it. Get away, as soon as you can. But these problems from your distribution lines, or the power lines, or the problems from the plumbing, or things like that, the only way to know that is to measure it. And I recommend that people use what's called a Gauss meter. It's Gaussmeter, and there's a plethora of them available on the market. They're fairly inexpensive. And just, get together with your friends and family and buy one, and because you only have to measure one. Buy one and pass it around the home, to everybody.
Sure. I think I picked up a tri-field about 10, 15 years ago, and I still have it, and it seems to work just fine. And actually, I purchased 2 homes using that based on the results of that as a important differential component. I checked the whole home with that to make sure there were no aberrant fields there.
Yeah, like I said, they're fairly. You can buy them online, and they're fairly inexpensive yet. So, and it's something that every home should have, just to see whether or not this is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, because you don't know it's there, just like high blood pressure or diabetes. You really don't know until you check. Now,
Yeah.
one of the other common exposures that I was interviewing Dr. Robert Young, who wrote the pH Miracle, and he was explaining that the hair dryer that people use is actually even higher than a refrigerator.
Yeah, absolutely.
So very, very dangerous. So it probably shouldn't even be used at all, I would think.
A hairdryer is safe to use as long as it never gets within 5 feet of the body.
But how are you going to hold it?
I don't know. I'm just telling you the facts.
Yeah, I mean, geez, I mean, it's you got two things. You're holding it for one, so obviously you can't get any closer than that, and then it's right next to your head. I mean, that's like a prescription for disaster.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so for the most part, and there's really very now it was that a that's a that would be it goes off pretty rapidly because it's a magnetic field from
Right.
one
It's a
over the cube, point
one
source
over the
magnetic
cube.
field. Yeah, point source. Yeah, but and you can't now. What I don't think we touched on it here, but I know we have on in previous calls is that the magnetic fields cannot be shielded. You cannot shield them with metal. It goes right through lead, right?
Exactly. You can't shield the magnetic field at all. The only way to do it is to completely encase the source and ground it.
Okay.
It's called a Faraday cage.
All right, and those can be done, but it's not as simple as like a conduit cable or pipe that you're running wires through. It's a lot more complex system to set up.
Right.
So, and not something you're going to be doing to do a hair dryer. So stay away from those hair dryers. Are there any other tool items that people use routinely that are as dangerous as hair dryers that people may not be aware of?
Well, we talked about the cordless telephones, and so we know that that's a problem. Laptop computers that are on people's laps. The bottom of the laptop computers has a really high energy source, and so you shouldn't use those on top of somebody's lap.
Now, is this source electrical, so it can be shielded with a piece of metal?
No, it's both electrical and magnetic.
So there's a magnetic. Oh, so you can actually put a piece of metal in there. It'll block the thermal effects, but it won't block the magnetic component.
Right.
But because it's magnetic, it drops one over the cube. So if you put at least a few inches, you're going to be a lot safer.
That's right.
Yeah. So
So one of those lap pads that you can use it and put, some kind of reflective material on it to reflect the electric field.
yeah, and just another point that I'm sure you'll agree with is it's even worse, perhaps at least 10 times worse, if you have the computer plugged into an electrical outlet and that charging device is not grounded. Because, like Apple computers are notorious, they have ungrounded chargers for whatever reason.
All of them are that way. Well, the all of them are that way. The transformer can be grounded into the plug in the outlet, but once it comes from the transformer, that black box or white or whatever it is, the box in your cord to the computer, that's now ungrounded.
Well, I didn't realize that. I thought there was a big difference between a grounded plug from the transformer and an ungrounded because Apple uses ungrounded plugs.
Yeah. Well, every one of them does because what runs from the transformer to the computer's DC. There's no ground.
Okay, so maybe that's why they do that then. But
You're better off with all these devices to work on them when they're not plugged in.
yeah. So that's the bottom line. So if from your experience, there's really no big difference whether it's grounded or not,
Correct.
because it and can you ground DC or is it only AC that can be grounded?
You can ground DC in a sense to protect it, but it doesn't. It's not a real issue because it's the difference between the positive and the negative that's the issue, as opposed to the difference to ground.
Okay.
So, because it doesn't run relative to ground like the AC does.
Okay. All right. So that's another big important component that you agree to is this ideally you should, if you're using your computers, don't plug them in.
Well, anything. You're using your iPad, you're using your computer, you're using your Kindle, you're using any of those, or your cell phone, do not use them while they're charging.
Hmm. Interesting. So it becomes a bit of a challenge, because these batteries typically only last about 3 hours, and as the battery gets older, sometimes less than an hour. But nevertheless, if you want to optimize, that's certainly a good recommendation.
Well, one of the things to look at doing is, be alert to when it's recharged, unplug it.
Yeah.
Most of us get on it and it'll start losing its batteries, and we'll plug it in, and 5 hours later it's still plugged in because we forgot about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, reducing exposure is the best thing that we can hope for at this point.
Yeah. And is that a significant exposure? I guess if you're typing on it all the time, it would be. I mean, what type of differences between the plugged in and not plugged in?
Oh, it's orders of magnitude. It's huge.
So like more than 100 times difference.
Right.
Wow, that is.
So it's a huge difference. But again, the big focus is sleeping, and you're usually using your computer when you're awake.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another safe precaution. But I would caution somebody who's pregnant to be using a computer while it's plugged in on their lap.
Yeah,
because we have no idea what it's doing to the baby.
Yeah, they even have these pregnancy blankets now that you can put over the mother's womb that it is electrically shielded.
Yeah, we've gone back to that. We did that in the 80s with the CRTs.
Oh, we did?
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember that.
Oh, yeah, the CRTs, those big, heavy monitors that were out, that were putting out all
Oh,
those.
sure.
Then we had the pregnancy blankets. So now we've gone back to that.
Wow. And they do work, right? Well, at least they work for electrical. They're not going to work for magnetic, right?
If they're grounded, then it puts a shield between the baby and the source. So it will help. It'll help significantly. It's worth doing.
Okay.
But it's not going to provide total protection.
Yeah. So, and that obviously the baby, that newborn that is well, the unborn baby is going to be even more predisposed because they're just not mature enough to really defend themselves against this type of threat.
That's right. And as we know, that's of course when cell regeneration is working its fastest.